Yeah, well, then I guess we can just get it started. I mean, I got the promo for the new album. Obviously, we're here to talk about Majesties, and I was blown away. I mean, I was completely blown away. Me and a couple the podcast. There's three of us, and we all are pretty rooted in a lot of that '90s melodic death metal. So as soon as I heard it, I sent it to the other guys and said, "You guys got to hear this because it's exactly up our alley." And you just don't hear a lot of it these days, or at least I haven't heard it. So anyway, I just really wanted to talk to you guys about it and just, kind of get some history on the project and all that. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us.
I guess real quick, since, mainly people listen audio, if you guys just say your name and like what you do in the band so they can connect, the voice to who's talking.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll start. I'm Tanner, and I do guitars and vocals, and on this recording, drums. But we have a drummer for the future. So, yeah.
Cool.
I'm Carl Skildum, and I played guitars on this record and wrote the lyrics.
I'm Matt Kirkwold, and I played bass on this.
There we go. Okay. And you guys have some history besides this band. Say the names, because I always say Obsequiae and Inexorum. Well, how do you really say it?
I mean, once you start saying it and hearing that enough, that's how I say it too. I mean, we're not going to get into like ecclesiastical and liturgical Latin difference. So, yeah, I say obsequiae, but yeah. Carl, how do you say is it inexorum?
Well, it's funny. I used to say Inexorum, but I think I've heard it said both that way and Inexorum, and I've kind of gravitated towards the latter lately. So but it's a made up word. So however you say it, it's just fine.
Right. Okay. Cool. I just didn't want to get it wrong.
It's actually Majesties is the name of this band.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
So I know, I mean, you guys are like, you guys play together live, the live version of Obsequiae. And so obviously you've got that history together, but when did you come together? When did the project start, or when did the idea start? Like, how did you guys connect in the first place?
Well, Tanner had pulled me into the first version of the live Obsequiae lineup around 2015, and 2015, 2016 was really just kind of building that band to play live. And I think just one day I was playing around with some riffs at practice, warming up, and Tanner said, "Hey, what's that?" And I shrugged and I said, "I don't know." And we just kind of started talking about we should write a melodic death metal band, because that was something that both of us had bonded over. And as soon as we kind of met each other and discovered that we liked the same stuff, was a real bonding moment for both of us. And so that's kind of the genesis. And so I always think writing music and getting ready to play in a live format are kind of two different disciplines for me, and they require different types of mental effort. So it was fun to have the chance to build the live band for Obsequiae at one point time, and while also working on writing new stuff for a project that really didn't have, I don't know, we didn't have really objectives or a timeline or anything other than just it was meant to be time to hang out and kind of geek out about the kind of music that really inspired us at a early age.
Cool. So so that was back in 2015. So have you guys been writing for this since then?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the material that's on this record it came from around 2016, 2017. And that's where a lot of that stuff really kind of got laid down. We had probably 20, 25 song ideas by the time we, said, all right, we got to stop and cull this down and actually make a cut so that it's 10 songs. It's enough for a record, and kind of figure out how we wanted to do it. So we got pretty deep into just kind of squeezing everything that we could out of our brains and into this batch of song ideas. And that's really kind of, Tanner, do you remember how kind of when we said, all right, we have enough and now we need to call it down. It feels like it was 2018-ish, 2019.
Yeah, I want to say that's right. You were definitely the one, to I'll just keep going. I'm like, it was really helpful to work with you, Carl, because like, yeah, I'm a process person and I love getting 95% done with things and then walking away. And Carl's like, hey, we've got it, like let's put it together. So yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Cool. Matt, when did you get involved?
I knew that it was coming together pretty early on. They told me they were just messing around with some ideas of in that sound and style, and they were kind enough to offer me the bass position on it, and it's really fun for me because I'm just the bass player. And usually when I'm working on a project, I'm usually the producer and I'm handling a bunch of other duties at the same time. For this one, it's like they knocked out these tracks so well, handed me these wonderful polished tunes and said, here, go to town. And so it was great, but in very enjoyable process for me to do. But they brought me in around 2018 to start working on it, 2019.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
So
most of the I think all the music was done just like January or February of 2020. So right before pandemic kicked in, we were just all just like, yeah, high-fiving each other. We got this great stuff and it just needs vocals and then it'll be done. And then pandemic hit and that slowed things down a little bit, but
that makes sense. So when you guys met each other and you guys said you guys were geeking out and all that stuff, like what were some of the touchstone bands, like some of the ones where you guys like connected on from the beginning?
I feel like it might not have even been specific bands. I mean, because you could always like point to, the Holy Trinity of Gothenburg, but like a lot of times it came down to like the little signals, when someone says melodic death, and like you catch the barf in your mouth, but then someone's like, oh no, I mean like the first to Blaze My Sorrow, the first Eucharist album, or things like that. And then it was like, oh, this is awesome, and it's like, you ever listen to Fatal Embrace? You ever listen to the In Thy Dreams demo? And that's when shit gets like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life?
yeah, I remember that with like just talking about all these obscure bands, relatively speaking, that I had kind of been interested in and never met anybody else really who knew them. I mean, it in Minneapolis, I mean, I feel like the metal scene in the 90s when things were happening was very different. It really focused, I think. There's a lot of the New York sound was pretty popular here. Like the brutal death metal was, if people were playing heavy metal of any kind of style, that was what was happening. When all of this stuff that was happening in Sweden in 94 to 96, that was what was catching my ears. So I felt like it was hard for me to find friends locally who were interested in that stuff rather than just the most brutal of slams, which was kind of in vogue at that time. So it was fun and Tanner's like, oh yeah, I know all this stuff, and we just kind of couldn't believe it and how wonderful it was to be able to geek out over all that stuff. So that was pretty fun to finally have that chance to geek out over all this stuff.
Cool. So I guess my next question then is, because I've thought about this before. I mean, if you were, I don't know why I've thought about this, because I mean, I play guitar, but I don't play a lot. But just if I was to sit down and write, or to try to write something melodic death metal, especially something coming from those early days, how do you do it now without just, throwing out the same stuff that we've heard? And I remember thinking, do you go back to like what those bands were listening to and kind of like, take inspiration from similar bands? Like, we obviously In Flames loved Iron Maiden, and going back to those roots and then putting a new spin on it? Or, how did you guys approach that without just, I would think you didn't just say, we're going to go and just be influenced by those bands themselves specifically, but I don't know.
I think it's unique to both of us, I made a choice when I was younger to stunt my growth and to kind of take cue when like monstrosity was coming back and everything. I was like, all right, like, yeah, like Carl said, like if you wanted to be in a band in Minneapolis, St. Paul, like the big ones were kind of like Broken Hope clones, and then sort of like the what is death metal in like 1995 or 6 in the US, after like you've had sort of the first wave, like the 1992 before, and now you've just kind of got like people hanging on, just like brutal tough guys and stuff. But like, yeah, like I just personally like, it wasn't so much like, oh, I need to really like study this stuff. It's more just like I never listened to melodic death metal past a certain point, and I sort of like developed my playing style around it. I mean, it certainly took off in a lot of different directions, but that was like a home base for me. So like albums like Skydancer, even later stuff like Nightingale's Sylph, like the EP and the first album. I think like I didn't understand why a band who wrote that would write an album like Colony or anything. I never even bothered listening. I'm sure Dark Tranquility's Haven is great. I don't care. Like, so I didn't have to like, oh, I should work backward. It was more just a stubbornness back then that paid off.
Yeah. Okay. So you pretty much stopped after the glory days of most of those bands early on and never really went any further.
Yeah. Other things that caught my attention. I mean, it was like, kind of like the early stuff, like early melodic death metal, like there's a conversation to be have about like the first Abigor album. Is it melodic death metal? Like there's a lot of kind of cool things happening, even on the No Fashion label. You look at bands like Noctis or something where it's like, this is fucking insane. Or check bands like Avenger, the original, like the Breath of Night recording of Fall of Devotion. Like the stuff that those bands were doing was kind of like very indicative of the time where they're soaking up kind of like what black metal is becoming as it's sort of like permeating through underground, music and culture and stuff. And yeah, it's just, there's a whole wellspring of things to take from.
That was what looped me in on it. Those early days is that hearing it was the Wrong Again Records comp that really was the first thing that I heard that was full of this, a whole bunch of different bands, and they none of them sounded exactly the same. That's one thing that I thought was cool about that, and for us it was important to maintain that all those early melodic death metal bands, none of them were clones of each other. And I think for Tanner and I writing this stuff, we wanted it to sound like, hey, you'll recognize this as early melodic death metal, but we don't want it to sound like anyone else. We want it to sound like us. We want it to be our own thing. It should stand on its own, or it's not just to be a copy. But I loved how all of that stuff had elements of, it had death metal, it had black metal, it had traditional heavy metal, all wrapped up in one really exciting package that just felt wild. That's really the way I felt when I listened to that, that first In Flames song on that comp. I'm like, this is riff after riff of just really, it's not really repeating stuff. Maybe it goes back to ideas here and there, but it's not verse, chorus, verse. It's just, these guys had so many ideas and they had to put them all down in a row and somehow link them together, and it just worked for me. So that's something that I think that early style of just the writing almost in a linear fashion, where you've got a lot more riffs per song, and it's the challenge is to kind of try to make it still a journey that makes sense as a listener. And that was really a fun challenge to kind of keep it rolling while not dwelling on any part for too long, and kind of having it be a song that evolves from beginning to end rather than repeating a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, like a wild ride. And I get that from it too. It like, it feels that way, but yet it's got those big moments, those big catchy moments that keep it held together. And yeah, and I think you guys nailed it with having your own sound to it, because you can hear, like, sprinkles of both your guys' playing style, you know, that we know from your other primary bands, in there. So it definitely doesn't feel like you're just listening to something from the 90s. It feels new, it feels fresh, but it obviously appeals to anyone who likes that kind of stuff, to me at least.
That's
Cool.
really cool. I mean, it's funny because like I don't think it was intentional. We were kind of concerned about like, can we do this without sounding like ourselves, you know? And I really think it speaks to like just how much that has become a primary language for our own works too, you know?
Yeah, I
Makes
mean,
sense.
I think this stuff has just become part of our shared musical language. And it's appeared, I mean, in every other band that I've done in the last 20 years, it's been a part of what I've put into it, even if it's not as a parent. This is really just more of the chance for it to really be focused on this style that was so important to me and has been for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you guys were writing it then, you guys just kind of share the duties, you guys send each other riffs, or how did that all work?
Mostly we were just sitting in the same room passing the guitar back and forth. I mean, we'd
Okay.
sit down and someone would have a riff and we'd record it, and the other guy would say, "Oh, I know what to do over the top of that," or "I know how to. I'll play a harmony and figure it out." And it was so much fun. It was just like the most relaxing and instantly gratifying writing process, because I don't know, every once in a while when I'm writing stuff by myself, I'll get stuck. I'll feel like, this is dumb. And whenever that happened to me in this process, Tanner would be there to say, "Oh, how about this?" And instantly we're back on track and moving forward. It was just a blast.
Yeah, it gave me a lot of confidence writing with Carl because there are just some things that like I don't know, you don't necessarily like commit to certain ideas or like kind of believe in their follow through until someone else is there like, no, just do that. And I sort of like when you see like someone who's like maybe been playing guitar for like a short period of time and they're like playing a riff and it's like super mean and nasty and you're like, damn, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know. And you're like, if I wrote that, and then you're like, wait, if I did write that, what would I do with it, you know, like where does this fit? And it just like it's very fun to kind of I think some of our styles can be a little bit on the nose, you know, like for mine with like some of the castle riffs and stuff. I don't know about Carl, I don't mean to like bring you down to my level here, but like
No, man.
there's stuff that's like very Carl, I feel like, especially like not just your vibrato, but like your resolve and phrasing and stuff. And yeah, I learned a lot just writing with you. And I think having something like this to do, like playing melodic death metal is different because like in any other setting, I have a really hard time writing with people because I get an idea and I get really possessive, and I don't think I'm like necessarily a great person to be in a band with. But I feel like I knew that long enough ago that like there aren't really casualties of that personality type. I mean, I'm fine being in bands where people tell me what to do, but I also like having bands where that happens too. With like Carl and I writing, I feel like it was just like this naturally follows, and of course, Carl, you're doing everything that anyone should do. It's amazing, you know, and widening my scope, broadening my horizons, you know, even within something as familiar as this.
That's interesting, because I did have that question, because I as far as I know, you guys are both primary songwriters. You guys are, you guys have your vision. So when you would wonder, like, you put two people together who are normally just doing their own thing, do you have to figure out how to work together? But it sounds like it was pretty smooth and pretty easy. So that's cool.
Yeah, I've had some experience with that. Most recently with Matt, because Matt plays guitar in Antivirus with me, and so he and I would, we wrote a lot of material together for that project, and so fortunately had a chance to get my feet under me with being collaborative writer and not feeling like I had to hold the reins too closely. So I mean that was helpful to have had Matt teach me some of those skills as well.
Matt, what about you, man? So did you have the same love for the early melodic death metal too, or where did you come from with all that?
I'm a noob. I have to admit it. I wasn't aware of the early days of it like that. I was aware of bands in their later phase. You know, I would say the post Tanner years of of melodic death metal, and I didn't really like a lot. I felt like some of those records were just so, I don't know how to describe it. It felt really formulaic in a lot of them. Like I'd have people tell me about how much they love In Flames. I'd go listen to In Flames. I'd be like, this is just not doing it for me. That being said, I found my way into them in some of the later stuff because I am a fan of poppier things at times. But when these guys started getting me into it, they were very kind about it by sharing what music inspired them. And it became something for me that started to reignite my teenage youthful excitement for new music. Like it's been a long time since I found something that made me go, holy shit. And then I dig into the next one, and I go, holy shit. And I dig into the next one. And so I've been deep into it now for a few years. And I'm just glad that they gave me the opportunity to play with them, not being as well versed in it as they are. But I'm currently still going through that excitement phase of finding bands that I'd never heard 25 years ago, and digging in on them and really finding a lot of amazing stuff, and wishing I would have been there at the time when it was blowing up, because I would have been right there along with you guys and that stuff. That's right up my alley of music. So I am happy to tell you that I am now getting well informed in this kind of music, and I'm very happy to be part of it.
That's awesome. I mean, there's nothing really better than that, finding those the things you missed that are just great like that. I mean, that's awesome. I think we all wish we could go back to that, hear those albums for the first time anyway, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
It feels like the first time.
Cool. Yeah, so I know, because it's for me, I kind of had that like a backwards thing, I guess closer to Matt, but I came at it from not the later albums, but at least from like Slaughter the Soul, because I came into it more from metalcore. I started with some of that stuff before I got into extreme stuff. And I remember being like, you read an interview and these bands would reference, all those Swedish bands, and then I would go and look those up and be like, wow, okay, the source is is even better than what I was into. And then I would go down the road, and then I had to backtrack, to the early stuff. And so, everybody comes to it in a different way. So, I mean, I feel like however you get there, you find the good stuff finally, and, it's worth it.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I really feel influenced just kind of our excitement for doing this was hard to find. I mean, even when it was brand new, you couldn't, you had to get them from a CD import. I mean, it wasn't this, the internet was just kind of, starting to become a thing, and you might learn about the bands, but you wouldn't stream them or download it. That was mid 90s was kind of a little bit before that. So it was hard to find this stuff, and I think that's a big reason why for me it was, when I find somebody who had even a passing interest in it, was like, oh yeah, we're friends now right away. And it was just like it wasn't all over the place like the more, once like you said, the metalcore stuff and the kind of the alternative metal element that sort of crept into it around the 2000s, that's when it kind of started to be everywhere. And it's also when I started to feel like, because I kept listening to those records, I kept buying In Flames, I kept buying Dark Tranquility records, and I remember feeling like, is it me? Is there something wrong with me? Why isn't this as great? And I had to kind of unpack all of that. But I'm glad to see that those bands still exist, and it's kind of cool to hear there's, from what I've heard from the new In Flames record, it sounds like they're kind of trying to go back to capture a little bit of the fire they had in their younger days. And I think I think it's awesome. You know, I can totally understand why he'd want to go back to the early stuff because it rules. So
Yeah, I've heard that too. I haven't listened yet. I heard this. I heard the talk about that Halo Effect album. People were kind of saying that. I haven't listened to that one yet either, but I've heard mixed things. But yeah, I know. I remember another weird thing was when In Flames, when they got to God, what album was it? Come Clarity? Is that an album? I think Come Clarity, yeah. Oh, hold on one second here. What's this thing doing to me? Yeah, on that album, they it's like they actually, they influenced the metalcore stuff, and then they almost went and did it. They like kind of did that sound on that album. I remember thinking that was such a crazy thing that they influenced those bands, and then they almost used some of that sound in the later era. At the time, I remember being kind of into it, but it didn't age as well for me. But to be fair, I haven't listened in a long time, so I don't know.
yeah, that was funny. That record came out on a label that is run by a friend of mine called Ferret Records in the United States, and that was a hardcore label. And so for an In Flames record to come out on Ferret was really a big deal. And I think that's where I felt like, yeah, this is an inflection point where, because I know a lot about hardcore from that time frame too, and it was. Yeah, I was just so surprised to hear bands that were ostensibly hardcore bands, and they'd have Slaughter of the Soul as their primary template for what they were trying to sound like. And I remember feeling like this is a strange mixing of elements that wasn't quite what I wanted to hear. So I think that was really a point where I started to need to take a little bit of a break and try some different things, and also just focus on, well, these original records are the ones that I really want to listen to. So maybe I'll put that old stuff on instead of the new one.
Yeah. Has there been anything that has stood out in the more recent years, besides what you guys have been doing like that has caught your ears specific to melodic death metal? I mean, we can go into other stuff too, but like in that sound, especially from the earlier sound, not like the more modern.
I don't know. There's, I don't even know. I opened my mouth first. I was thinking about this last night because we had a podcast yesterday too, and the question didn't come up, and I'd been anticipating it, and like I went to bed last night listening to Nightingales, and it was Five Scars, and there's like a couple good riffs, but it's sort of like there's just a little bit of like American, I don't know, like just stuff. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right. But like I listened to the one from 2018, and it was like, this is better. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's interesting. Like these bands are allowed to evolve. Like we're not gatekeepers of the sound or
Yeah.
something. You know what I mean? Like, and I know like I find myself being more critical, but I don't know. There needs to be a place for that too. Like these bands are lauded, they're celebrated. Like I'm not going to talk shit about like New In Flames trying to go back to whatever it was. Like even if they don't have any original members, like at least they're listening to fans that want them to do that. Halo Effect certainly is, but I haven't really heard a lot of the things that I loved in melodic death metal. Like you think of a label like Black Lion or something like that, where it's like, they have like a Knorris quintet or like This Ending or whatever band iteration they're on, like on it, where it's like, oh, this is cool. What are these other bands? And like, it's so hit or miss, or these weird, like, it's always like some guy who's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sing. But I'm like, none of these dudes sing. They like studio sing. And it's like, I don't know. I just like hate singing too. Like for the most part, like at least like in that sense of like Nightingales, where it's, I just don't know what the fuck you're thinking when you do that stuff. Like, it's like I can't wait to impress our girlfriends or something, or like this, and then there's like cello in it. Like fuck off! It's just the worst, But like Eternal Champion, there are like moments of like melodic death metal and Eternal Champion that I love, and I don't think that it's necessarily like in twin harmony as much. Like same with like Gatekeeper, you know, but like they also have a lot of kind of like groove, like Morgana Le Fay, or like some of that, like even like Nevermore and stuff like that rips. I think bands like Eternal Champion are like 10 times as good as even the hype around them. You know, like that's like what I listen to for like melodic metal, you know, but not so much melodic death metal. I'm really sorry for that rambling.
I mean, I have a couple bands that I think that are new that I always enjoy. Like I like Insomnium a lot, and I don't think they really sound a lot like the early days, but they're to me a really cool example of you know, they've kind of done their own thing, and I always find that I'm you know, entertained when I hear it. I like Bellacore as well. So some of that stuff to me has a little bit more progressive elements to it, kind of, you know, not that far off from what Opeth did for a little while. So I mean, I kind of I like that progressive element to it. But none of it feels like it's aggressive and crazy the way, you know, some of the early stuff that I discovered back in the day. So, you know, it's just it's a variation on a theme.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but that's what's cool about what you guys are doing, because it kind of does fill a space that like we haven't had. We've had so much old school of the more straight ahead, you know, death metal and those kind of things, but we haven't had just like people exploring more of that older melodic death metal sound. So I mean, it's awesome to hear. I mean, I wouldn't mind to hear more bands and projects, you know, kind of doing that sound. I don't know if anyone will take the cue from you guys on that or not, but I mean, I feel like it's time. We've had so much of the other stuff. So
Yeah, that's like I wouldn't say a passion, but like anyone that messages like the Obsequiae Instagram and they're like, how do you get that tone? I'm like, send me a screenshot of your DAW. Like, let me see what you're running. Like, let me see the chain. Like, I want people to like do this, you know, like I can't speak for melodic death metal. Like even now, like when we talk about this stuff, like we're talking as fans, like I'm not trying to hold Majesties as some standard, you know, like we're figuring this stuff out. We love melodic death metal, you know, but like I want people to write music, and if there's anything I can do to help, like if you're listening, of course, like everyone listening has 6 bands, you know, so like let's talk.
yeah, let's get more of it. So as far as the old stuff goes, if you were gonna pick one album, you know, I guess one album, one demo, something like that. Is there one that you could pick, like each of you guys, like one of the early stuff?
For me, it's Subterranean from In Flames.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's just it's a funny one because that's the one with it's an EP, so it's all killer, no filler. And that's the you never, like Matt said, you never forget your first, and that's where I'm like, I got this EP, I ordered it from an import service, and you know, the day it arrived, it's like the eagle has landed. This is magic, and it's been a favorite ever since.
I would echo that 100%. Yeah.
Nice.
Mine's
What about
a little. Oh, I'm sorry. Keep going, Tanner. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. That's it.
I found my way in backwards back when even before I met Tanner and Carl. I kept trying to go into In Flames, and so for me it's Jester Race, but I found it in such a weird way. I literally started, this is probably like 10-12 years ago, I started with the newest record and just started going all the way back and kept, you know, each record was just kind of like those first newest 5 records were just like, I don't know what I'm listening to. And I got all the way down to the last one on the list, Jester Race, and I listened to that over. And that's the one record I've loved for a long time. And it mostly, the reason I fell in love with it was some of the greatest guitar solos I've ever heard on a metal record. And you know.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know if like Jason, you have an opinion on this too, but like I might even like change the answer depending on my mood, which I don't think is unusual, but like I don't think like the Jester race with Daniel Erlandson drumming would have been as good. There's something about how simple the drums were that like really serviced the guitars, like all those layers, to like give them more attention. Yeah, and similarly, somehow like I think it also on Subterranean like really helped give it like all those layers so much more it's a very comfortable kind of like not template but just like flow because it's just so insane and so short. Like I don't think that could have been anything but an EP, you know, because it's just it's too much. It's like a fine patisserie, you know, like you wouldn't want more than one.
Now, is that where you guys would draw the line though, would be the Jester race, or do you guys go to like Coracle at all or beyond?
I think Coracle's got some great songs like Gyroscope and like I forget that track 6. I mean, it like I'd say it sucks because I'm thinking of like how I felt then, but really it's just like whatever Anders is doing his like, you know, it's like
Yeah.
stuff. But like that track 6 has got some like sick melodies. Like there's a lot of things that are redeemable, and like these days when you go back to that stuff, it's like, you know, thank God it's still metal, you know, because it's more than you can say for like black metal, you know, or something like from the past 20 years or you know, anything really. I don't know. So there's some redeemable parts. Yeah.
We didn't talk too much about like At the Gates. What do you guys listen to that band much, or a favorite? I've been listening a lot more lately to The Red in the Sky Is Ours. Had more of an appreciation for that the past 2 years. But what about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, like At the Gates is like the best. You know, Alf Svensson is like, I don't know. He's like, yeah, everyone knows. I don't need to say anything.
He's a madman.
Yeah, and like Terminal Spirit's good. You know, Slaughter the Soul is cool, but it's sort of one of those things. You remember when you were like talking about In Flames, like making an album that kind of like appealed to maybe bands they were touring with or whoever, whatever you guys were saying, like without even knowing as much specifically about that album, I feel like sometimes bands take a break, and At the Gates did that. And everyone was like, you heard the new At the Gates whenever they came back, whatever album that was. And like, I remember like my old boss played it often, and I wanted to like it, but I was like, you know, they've been gone too much. The same with Eucharist, you know, like I just don't think you can come back after that long. Like you put out something, so many bands have like not made it better, you know, but like they've done so much to that style that like when you come back, you can risk sounding stale. And that's not like an opinion on At the Gates. It's just that I think that's a problem with a really successful and accessible album like Slaughter of the Soul is like Alf Svensson is insane. It sounds like the rest of the band is keeping up with him, you know? And it's, you know, Daniel Erlandson's little brother or older brother, Adrian, you know, like he did an awesome job. He's an insane drummer. Like they sound like a death metal band. And if you ask Haval from Sarcasm, it's their only death metal album, you know, even with Fear teeters on, I guess, something that I trust Haval. So, but I love all of it with Alf.
Yeah. Same with you, Carl, or what do you think?
I remember when I first heard The Red in the Sky Is Ours, it took a few listens before it clicked with me, and that's sometimes a good thing. I mean, I don't need everything to be an immediate, you know, set of hooks and into me that like maybe Slaughter of the Soul was just instantaneous. You know, you could, you know, it was really a shot of adrenaline right away. But I first heard them on Terminal Spirit Disease, so that was the EP that came out before that record, and that one still is a favorite of mine because it sort of feels like it bridges their two eras a little bit. I mean, especially with some of those live songs from earlier records in there too. It is kind of, it makes that through line of how they developed it makes it a lot more clear to see where they came from and where they're going. So I have a soft spot for that record. But yeah, like Tanner said, I love all that early stuff.
Yeah. And Matt, have you went into the early at the gates, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, I started with Slaughter of the Soul because that record was everywhere when it came out, and I really enjoyed that. And then I admit that I love when At War with Reality came out. I still love that record, and Don't Shoot Me. It kind of is my favorite for different reasons, and so I've gone backwards. Carl introduced me to Terminal Spirit Disease a couple of years ago, and I love that one. And I honestly have only listened to The Red in the Sky Is Ours maybe 3 or 4 times. It just never quite clicked with me for whatever reason. I seem to really like later At the Gates for some reason.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, I actually I do too. I mean, I've liked even up to when they did, At War with Reality. I enjoyed it, and I liked the one after that. I didn't like the newest one, but I'm such a fan
didn't
of.
like-
What was that?
Sorry, I didn't like the production on the new record. It sounded really, I don't know, thrown together.
Yeah, they were trying a lot of things, and cool, but yeah, I don't know. That one didn't work for me. But I'm such a fan of Tampa and his vocals, and I don't know. It's one of those bands I always like to follow, you know. But yeah, nothing compares, to the early stuff. I kept wishing every time they would get a new guitarist, maybe it'd be Elf, just to see what would happen. I mean, I know it's probably not, I know it's not going to be the same, but it would be cool. It'd be a cool experiment, I guess, is all I would say. But how about this one, Dark Tranquility? Would you go Sky? Well, Tanner, I don't think I have to ask you this because of your background, but Sky Dancer or God, the Gathering, the Gallery? Why am I forgetting this now? The Gallery?
The Gallery.
Yeah. Which one would you pick there?
I don't like the Gallery. I actually like the first half of the Mind's Eye. I mean, I think that of the Gallery is like brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, by Dark Tranquility standards, I actually think A Moonclad Reflection, their second 7-inch, is like one of the best, like some of the best melodic death metal. It's just like so atmospheric, so heavy. I actually reread an old zine before the release of Sky Dancer 2 days ago. And Nicholas Sundin is just like talking about death metal and the state of death metal, and he's like just mentioning like Verathron and like how little you can do with death metal and stuff. And he also mentioned that Sky Dancer was supposed to be called In the Golden Dawn of Winter, and Necropolis was putting it out, which is insane. But like, yeah, sorry, what was the question? Moonclad Reflection, and if I had to pick between the Gallery, for a style, I'll take Sacrilege's The Fifth Season any day over it, because I think it is very similar as far as like locking in. There's definitely more unconventional, like not time signatures, but sort of like stutters of time signatures, like little cutoffs in the Gallery. But like The Fifth Season by Sacrilege is like so percussively melodic, and you don't hear that except in like, I don't know, I don't want to say like progressive metal, but like, yeah, there's like something Mark Zonder from like Warlord or Fate's Warning would appreciate, I'm sure, that's like just different from the Gallery. There's a lot going on.
How about you, Carl?
I like Of Chaos and Eternal Night, and The Mind's Eye is a big favorite of mine too. So I know I chose 2 that you didn't offer up.
No, the EP. I mean, that one, I forget about it, and every time I go back to it, I am just blown away. So I'm with you on that. That's a great one.
The Enter Suicidal Angels too, because there's there's some songs that weren't on Mind's Eye, or at least one in it. Yeah.
What about your favorite, melodic death, black, whatever, that isn't from Sweden? Do you have any there, or do you just focus on that region?
No, I never intended it to be like Sweden. I mean, like, I think I'd go back more to actually just death metal at that point. Like, like Gorment, you know, Morpheus, pretty interchangeable for those eras and stuff. Sentence, even though, as Jeff Wagner has pointed out, you know, like it is just atheist, or you know, worship, but in like a finished sense.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
if you listen to like, yeah, North from Here, right next to like, yeah, Piece of Time, it's like, holy shit, this is how did I put this together sooner? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great melodic death metal, like obviously like Exhumation, you know, from Greece. I guess did he move to Sweden? Or was that
I don't know.
But like, yeah, a lot of the Finnish stuff and like a lot of the kind of like adjacent melodic death metal stuff, like Fall of the Leaf is like a Bible to me, you know, especially the first two albums, and
Yeah.
even the stuff where they were just a rock band is nuts.
What about you know, with some of the more melodic black metal stuff? I know we had done an episode, I think it was last year, just kind of going through a lot of that stuff. What am I trying to think? Dawn, you know,
I hate
Vinterland.
Slaughter Sun is like, I think, a terrible album. And I love Henke, I love Dawn. I have all the belief in the world that like whenever the Fourfold Furnace comes out, hopefully before Sadistic Intent's first album, you know, like that'd be great. But like the first Dawn album, I like worship. I think that's got the same drummer. Was it Carlson, the Mythotine dude? Yeah, fucking near Solon, Garporp, or whatever, Nif, or whatever it's called. You know, like it's not even Swedish. It's like, what's the dude from Arcanum translating? You know, like all those old ancient Swedish songs. So
yeah, that record I is my favorite of theirs too, and it's just it's so propulsive. It's just like you hear the drumming. It's just like those blasts, just they're relentless, and it's not tippy tappy the way some of the earlier stuff in that era. When I was a big death metal guy, and I'd hear these thinly produced black metal drums, and I'd be like, oh man, this isn't really as heavy as I want it to be. But that record, it just pounds. It's just so cool.
Yeah, it was like Naglfar, you know, Vitra, like they've got a lot of like a lot of heavy metal going on. And Enslave the Astral Fortress off Vitra is super sick. You know, like what are some of the other like melodic black metal?
What about like Sacramentum
Sun
versus Dissection? What about that?
Oh, not even a comparison. I mean, like there's a reason what's his name left for Dissection. Forget, he was that dude who was in like Decameron, and yeah, I mean, like Sacramentum's great, but you kidding me? Like, you know, like, and by like what's his name, Anders Berlaki, you know, like by his own admission, like they were a terrible live band. Emil Notefight, you know, like John's brother, also played live second guitars on that Far Away from the Sun tour. Of like they sounded good on that. I have some bootleg cassette of it, but yeah, like fuck no, Sacramentum. I actually like.
I'm closer than that. It's harder for me. So
it depends. Like I think the Somber Lane is like the pinnacle of Dissection, and that's not taken away from Storm of the Light's Bane, you know, before they broke up and never put out another album.
Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, it's tough. My appreciation of Dissection has changed with all of the bad events of what Don was involved with. So it's harder. I feel less like I enjoy it less than I did, even though in my head I can hear those whole albums from start to finish because I listened to them so many times. So that's a complicated one. Whereas for me, that I don't think I actually heard Far Away from the Sun until more recently. So that's like a newer discovery. It's one of those that just slipped me by in the early days, and now that I've gotten to know it, it's just like this is fresh and it's new, and maybe so that newness hasn't worn off as of yet. But as far as I know, there's not any I'm not conflicted about listening to that one as much.
Right. I get it.
I see
Yeah.
that, like bands like Sacramentum or Lord Belial, Cythereal, like are just too. They're just a little like far removed from like right next to a conversation like Dark Tranquility, but for the time, it makes sense, I guess. You know.
Yeah, there's this. It was cool because you could kind of see there was all that influence that was happening that was still these they hadn't completely diverged from each other entirely. There's still elements of both death metal and black metal, and they were kind of mixing.
Like singing about Dawn, I was thinking about Arcanum, like Shamatai or whatever, like Coaster, his second album, that is a headphone album. Like the left and right of that, the guitar work is like, it's deceiving, like just how intricate. I'm not saying like technical, I'm just saying like it's really well stacked. It's very
sophisticated.
You can tell, like, of course he had something to do with At the Gates, even if he was like 13 drumming for Grotesque or something, like they definitely cut their teeth on the same stuff around the same, weirdos like Alf.
Yeah. All right. Let's finish on this one then. So those are a lot of the bigger ones. What about if you had to recommend someone who's like, I know all the big stuff, I know the big three of Gothenburg and all that, but they want to check out something that's much less talked about but worthwhile? Do you guys have like an underrated one or something that people should dig in deeper?
Yeah, the first Ablaze My Sorrow album, Miscreants, Dreaming Ice. I'm gonna kick myself the second we're off this Zoom call. I mean, there's a lot. But those are things you don't have to search hard for, like you find them.
Yeah, Eucharist, I think that was another one that I feel is those first two albums are very different, but I like them both a lot. I think Fall of the Leaf, Tanner, you mentioned that, and those first two records are just incredibly good, and like you said, even the rock stuff they did later was still really cool, but those first two are just kind of magical records that I feel like maybe people don't know as much about them, just because at least for me it was hard to get hold of that stuff at all. I think it was only recently that I've been able to track down all of that stuff, but it's so great. It's just magic. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of stuff. We're going to be doing a DJ session on Gimme Metal in March, and so we've got a bunch of cool stuff that we've dug up that probably we're still refining it. A Canaris Quintet, that's another great one that is maybe not on the tip of everyone's tongue, but they rule.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of those bands too that are like, everyone's like, you gotta fucking listen to the Moaning, and it's like, do you? Nicholas Svensson and Oscar Carlson collectively, like made 3 melodic death metal bands that could have just been one, like. So yeah, I'd say Miscreant, Dreaming Ice over some of that stuff,
Yeah.
Sarcasm. I mean, that's one that's more recent, where it's like everything they do is great.
Totally. Yeah, Sarcasm has been putting out some great records. I mean, even just last year they had a killer record.
That's a good call. Nice. Matt, anything you want to throw in there?
I defer to these guys.
Yeah.
My place on that one.
I hear you. All right, cool. Last thing then. So are you guys gonna do anything live at all? I know it's new still, and half you guys do the live stuff with Obsequiae. What do you think? Or we'll wait and see.
I'm waiting, like, Carl, you gotta quit your job. Matt, come on, let's do it.
Let's
I
go.
mean, we I think we all think it'd be fun, but we've got a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, all of our other projects still live on, and You know, we're trying to keep everything moving. So it's not impossible, but it's not going to happen like in 2023. But you know, we never say never, and it seems like could be a lot of fun when the time is right.
Cool. And are you guys going to continue on with it? Is it a one-off? Is it, is it a project or is it a full band? Like,
it was a one-off until we found out like that Jason from Into the Combine podcast was into us, and we were like, well, this has clearly gotten out of hand, so like we better make a second record. I think this is all like kind of been a conversation that's ongoing, so it's hard to answer, but like, hell yeah, we're super stoked that people are stoked. And I really think you guys should log on to the Instagram page, because if you want to like talk about like nerdy melodic death metal, I am fielding it. People, there are dudes, there are lonely men that need people to talk to about, the Wrong Again compilation. So hell yeah, let's go play for them so they can stay home.
Perfect. All right, cool. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Like I said, I fucking love it. It's all I've been listening to. So hopefully everybody else loves it as much. I'm sure they will. $20 spin, so that means everyone's gonna see it. So that's great. So good luck with it coming out.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really had a fun time talking to you.
Cool. Yeah, and I always like to talk about melodic death metal in the early days. So hopefully I didn't keep you guys too long, but